It's great to see everyone here, and thanks so much for joining this panel. This is one of those conversations that, first off, I'm incredibly excited and honored to be here with these four great panelists. Fantastic leaders in the space, representing amazing brands, and talking about a topic that is actually relevant to every single person in this room. Whether you're in marketing or sales, product development, there is a theme around mentorship that can help your career and help other people around you. So I'm really happy to have this opportunity to talk to you. So maybe we can go down the row and you can do some quick introductions about who you are, where you're coming from. And another important question, for anyone who has seen the movie Midnight in Paris, show of hands, anyone who's seen that? Critically acclaimed Owen Wilson movie, yeah. What is the decade, if you were to choose an era outside of the current era that you would live in, what would it be and why? So maybe we'll start there. I'm hitting the hard-hitting questions right away, so go ahead.
Oh, am I first? Hello, Liz Crisafi. I am the Global Vice President of IHG Hotels and Resorts. I'm excited to be here and talk about this great discussion. I guess for my decade, I would choose the 80s. And yes, I was alive in the 80s, for those of you who are doing math in my career history. But I was a child, and I remember thinking about how women were coming up and really, like watching shows like Who's the Boss, and just watching women really take leadership roles. And I thought about the fact that I would love to be at the forefront of the women's movement in the 80s. So I guess that's probably why, as well as I love the music of the 80s, of course.
Hi, I'm Claudia Simon. I'm also with IHG in product management. Liz is my mentor, so I'm here representing the mentees. And I love this discussion because we've had a great relationship, and it's something I really want to talk into. As far as my decade, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I love the 90s. I'm a 90s chick. I just think the technology was developing there. It was the decade before instant gratification. So I think people love the ride of getting into the mobile aspect, the internet, even movies with animation. And so I find it exciting, and that would be my decade.
Hi, everybody. Marisa Solis. I head up global brand and consumer marketing at the NFL. And I guess my decade is the Roaring 20s. It was a time of change and, a time when society was rebelling a bit. And I feel that we're in that time right now. And I'm a bit of a rebel as well. So that's mine.
Perfect.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Bishop. I also work on our global brand and consumer marketing team at the NFL with Marisa. My decade, not to take from Liz, would also be the 80s. I was a kid in the 80s as well, but I, can only dream about what advertising budgets used to look like in the 80s. So I feel like that would be something that would be really magical.
And the creatives and everything else, it would be magical. I love that question because there's no wrong answer. It's just how do you get there? Whether it's the 80s, I'm glad that we have some alignment on the panel. That's really good. The Roaring 20s, or for the Angela Bauer, Who's the Boss reference down the end for the 80s, another one for the 80s. So it's perfect. The concept of mentorship and guidance is something that takes on so many different definitions to different people. And that's one of the things we want to explore today. So for people in the audience, who here has been a mentor to somebody? Show of hands. It's a lot of people. Who here has taken part in a mentorship program but then changed their mentor after a period of time? Maybe the first mentor didn't work out. Yeah, a couple of honest people. Okay. And this is part of what we wanted to talk about. Mentorship can be incredibly fulfilling, incredibly valuable, but it has to have the right relationship. You have to have the right types of conversations. So maybe we can start right here. Sarah, how did you find Marisa as your mentor? How did this relationship start?
Yeah, I'm lucky that Marissa's my boss, and I'm not pumping her tires, so nothing I say today is because of that. But I think we were talking about this earlier. I think, the basis of any good mentor-mentee relationship is that respect and trust level. And being able to have that and then feel like you can be really vulnerable with that person. And so I'm lucky enough that I have that in my boss, but also, from the time I started, Marisa has always taken such a keen interest in knowing about who you are beyond just your 9 to 5. And so that, I think, from the very beginning, created sort of a space that allowed me to be able to share, what I was going through from a work perspective, celebrate the wins, talk through the challenges, but then also talk about how who I am as a person informs the day-to-day. And I think that doesn't always happen with a direct boss relationship all the time. So I would say maybe for my case, it's probably a lot of luck, in addition to having somebody who, at my first interview with Marisa, I was like, this is going to be great. She's exactly the type of person that I would love to learn from. So.
And how long have you been working together?
Just over a year and a half.
Okay. So this happened quickly and has really matured into a great relationship. That's great to hear. Claudia, how about you? You've, first off, was Liz your first mentor or not?
I've had a couple of mentors, and I still have a few, but Liz is by one that has been very influential and has helped me go through.
And how did you get together initially?
Well, initially we synced up in IHG. They have a Lean In program. It's an employee resource group. So initially I did have a mentor with the group, and then from there, when it was time to move on, I was able to connect with Liz because he thought this would be a good match for you, and he was right. What makes our relationship really special is during the tail end of the pandemic, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So I really had to, the whole vulnerability, really had to practice what I preached and really just brought my whole self, because it was very consuming. And I know as a mentee, you kind of want to become this, it's career pathing. You want to put your best foot forward. It's also networking. But at that moment, I really needed to have someone to understand just the whole scope of me, everything that I was going through. And also be okay that if I needed to pause a little bit and find out, other opportunities within my career, I needed to focus on myself. And I wasn't afraid to talk to her about that, and she was able to really guide me through that journey.
That is a major topic that goes so far beyond work. And I think you mentioned something about bringing your whole self, Liz. Liz, how long into the mentor-mentee relationship did that topic come up?
It was actually just a couple of weeks. So I had mentored a lot of women in my career, and it becomes very much about like how you're managing your career growth and where you want to be, in 5 years, and what are the things that are your obstacles. And Claudia and I had a great rapport at first, but once she found out that she had been diagnosed with cancer, it was, I'll be honest, I was a little bit, lost as to what to say. How do I guide her through this? And I did, something that I hadn't really done before, which is I showed up as being vulnerable in our relationship. So I don't really talk about it publicly, but I have alopecia. And so when I was going through some really stressful moments, I had to wear a wig. And I was like, oh, I've never really told anybody that before. And when Claudia was going through cancer treatment, I was like, I don't know what else to do. So I loaned her my wig, and I was like,
that was the best Christmas photo, I could tell you that. It was a nice, beautiful blonde wig.
She was a blonde for a while. But those are the moments of like, I would have never discussed that as, where I was in my career journey and, as a leader in the organization. Not that I was ashamed of it, it just wasn't something that I like wore on my sleeve, but it was at least a moment where I could relate to her and try to let her know that it's okay to show up as your whole self, and you don't just have to be a professional mom and working mother that everybody can relate to, but you can actually have these moments in your life that are so much more, stressful and things that you can't control that you have to kind of work through. And I'm wearing pink, by the way, Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So everybody.
Be remiss not to ask, how has your journey been since that first conversation with breast cancer?
It's been tough, but I have a good team. I would say part of the coaching and also career-wise coaching was you need to ask questions. You need to feel confident with the plan. And I am on remission, and I do have an after plan to help keep my reoccurrence down. And I'm mentoring in a way of other women that are going through it. Actually, I have a dear friend today that's going to have her double mastectomy. So it's always just awareness. My first mammogram ended up being my last mammogram. I have no history. So it's one of those, just be aware. And then we're always not putting ourselves first sometimes, I feel like, as women, that this was very important to really focus on your health and move on. So it's called a journey for a reason, and part of my journey is to also share my story and to have everyone, check on themselves as well, because it is important.
Such an important message. Thank you. And thank you for sharing that. That is such an important message to hear today. Marisa, how, with your relationship actually being part of the same team, talk to me about how you mix the personal side with the work side, and what sort of guardrails or boundaries exist on those two?
Yeah, I mean, one thing about me, I don't differentiate. The personal is my work, and I'm just who I am no matter where I am. So while people may think it's very strange to have a mentor-mentee relationship when your boss, team member or vice versa, I actually think it's perfect. My approach to mentorship, it is exactly what it is. It is somebody who's lived an experience, sharing that with you and providing guidance. And so in that sense, I feel I can provide some guidance from Sarah, but I actually also see Sarah as a mentor. And there are times in conversations we've had when she's given me guidance, whether it is about, how to approach some of our younger members on the team, how to motivate the team. So I think it goes both ways. It's very much a mutual relationship. And most mentorship relationships should be, because that's when you get the richest part, when both provide that guidance and that trust.
It's amazing that you mentioned that, because we actually didn't talk about this part before the panel. Does anyone listen to the Adam Grant podcast? Anyone? Yeah, I see a couple heads nodding. He talked about in his most recent podcast 3 myths of mentorship, and the third myth was that it's unidirectional, that it's just advice from the mentor to the protege. But to your point,
never. I actually gain so much from every one of my mentor relationships, and at the end, I feel like I'm actually the mentee because I learn, so much from the conversations.
Yeah.
Sarah, what was it that you taught your mentor? What were some of the things that you thought that you didn't know that you were teaching?
This is a lot of pressure.
I know.
I mean, I think to Marissa's point, especially in the organization we're in right now, there are, a bunch of different levels of people, cross-generational. You're also dealing with a new generation and the Gen Z generation that have different approaches to, what it means to come to work and timeline for promotion and things like that. And so I think to Marissa's point, some of the stuff we've discussed that she's helped me with and I've maybe also provided some guidance on is just how to navigate sort of the interesting cross-generational way people bring their whole selves to work, and how to continue to pull the best out of people regardless of what their level is. I think, I'm a little bit closer to the weeds than Marisa is every day, so it's also helpful perspective to be able to provide to help shape then how we deal with and manage the team.
Well, and you talked about something around expectations, that people in different generations have different expectations. But let's talk about your expectations when you start to have these conversations that were just outside of the normal, performance of your own role. What were your expectations of Marisa?
It's a really interesting question, because I don't think I ever went into the relationship with here are my expectations of what I hope to get out of, my time with a mentor, my time with Marisa. I think it has naturally evolved. So, it's not, I think I tend to approach all of our interactions as thoughtfully as I can, because I know her time is limited. But I also think that there is just natural discussion that comes out of it. And naturally, it may start from a work perspective, but kind of flows into more of the personal. I remember I'm pregnant with my first child, and I remember finding out and being terrified to talk about it at work, because I was nervous. There is a misconception, I think, that especially when you are a woman and you work in sports, that, the train will leave the station without you while you're gone. And I've always been very career focused, and I remember coming into Marissa's office for a one-on-one and getting through all my other stuff to pad the awkward conversation in my mind, and then saying, by the way, I'm pregnant, I'm going to be over for a couple months, but don't worry, it's America, so I'll be back very quickly. Or like something like that. And Marisa was like, this is amazing. Like, you buried the lead. Like, this is what you should have led with. And so I think, that just like sort of helps me illustrate that naturally the expectations, I'm not approaching it with expectations beyond, looking for someone who is supportive and who's going to, I know, have my best interest at heart.
So congratulations. Yeah. When are you due?
In a few weeks. Sooner than I am ready for, but it's coming.
All right, we're ready for it. So, Claudia, you had a different start with the mentor-mentee relationship. As we heard, it was a kind of structured through the company. But what were your expectations? Because you proactively were seeking a mentor.
So very similar. We didn't really come with a list of expectations, but I think we shifted gears once it became a medical type of focus. But generally, it was I needed someone to hear me out. I needed someone to kind of, let me know that it would be okay to kind of look for career and projects that made sense for me, and as well as, accommodating the appointments that I had to fulfill. So I think in the beginning, it was a little bit of shifting gears where I was mostly like always driven and try to raise my hand for all those important projects to realize you really need to evaluate, and you will still be there in the limelight. You just have to work smarter in that regard, and then also take care of your health first. And then the next, once everything did, settle down, I was able to then pivot and then move forward and be a little bit more aggressive in the areas I want to expect. And that was kind of my expectations for Liz in a way, was being that sounding board and also establishing that trust would be just more high level of like, you need to be comfortable with your mentor and you need to have solid conversations. If not, you're not walking away with tangible resources. Like, that's the only way you're going to grow.
Liz, when you engage in this relationship and you're taking a lot of these these personal struggles into account, you mentioned that people have to take care of themselves. You gave me this really good soundbite earlier. Can you share that with everyone here, because it's something that it sounds like other people have heard of, but
I was going to say, I think most women in this audience probably have heard this before, but just like when you're getting on a plane, and if there was an emergency, you put your air mask on first. So, I mean, when you think about it as women, we are caretakers. We take care of our teams. We take care of our, family situations, our friends, our parents, and we always put ourselves last. We're always the first one to reschedule that appointment. We're always the first ones to not really understand when we're feeling stressed and how do we ground ourselves. And so I think if anything, and you mentioned this too, Marisa, is like Claudia taught me more than I taught her during this, because it helped me even remember that it's so important to take care of your physical and mental health so you can show up as your best self. And so that is something that we have to always just make a conscious effort to do.
Put your oxygen mask on first. Like you said, a lot of women in the audience might have heard that. I hadn't heard that before. And I was speaking with a couple of other guys at my company, and they hadn't heard that before. So gentlemen, listen, hear that. This is important. And you're right, because so many people, especially women, will think about others first and not take their own health, best interest into mind. And this is, I think, why we're doing this panel and this conversation. I have a lot more questions, but I want to see if anyone in the audience has any questions for these amazing panelists. We have one right here.
You said that you didn't think the mentor-mentee dynamic was one way, and you think it's two-way. So,
thank you. Everyone on the panel mentioned that they didn't think the mentor-mentee dynamic is one way and it's two-way. Do you feel like the language around mentor and mentee is outdated? And if so, what would you suggest?
That's a great question. I was going to say, I do. I don't know if I have like the right term. Claudia and I kind of use the word professional therapy a lot of times because it is a space where you can have a conversation on both ways of understanding what's happening in your life and being vulnerable, but also learning from one another and asking the tough questions sometimes that nobody else is asking. Because you can recognize somebody wants to say something and then they don't, but if you don't ask the question, then, you know, I think that's part of this relationship as well. And she asked me as many tough questions as I ask her.
Yeah, I was going to say it's definitely outdated in my mind. It connotes this notion of a very formal professional thing, like, oh, I got to ask this person, will you be my mentor? And then I got to sit down and have these weird exchanges. And it's not it at all. I think about it as mentoring moments, like take every opportunity to like absorb somebody's experience and learn from that. I will say though, the one thing, expectations are real. And I expect any one of my mentees or mentors to follow up and be accountable. And if I give some advice, I expect my mentor to go do the advice and follow up, because if not, then to me, it's not a worthwhile relationship. And, you know, that's where it stops. I think Sarah is a fabulous mentee because she's efficient. She asks for what she needs and she follows up on the advice. And that to me is a perfect, call it mentee or receiving of the guidance, right?
This area of accountability is something I want to touch on in a second, but Sarah, I want to hear your thoughts on the question from the audience first, in terms of, is it outdated? Is the term outdated?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is also because I think it sets you up to expect that your mentors always has to be someone who's incredibly more senior than you are. Mm-hmm. And I think there's so much to learn across your peer set from people who come from just different perspectives. So, you know, and that's always awkward, being like, hey, I want to have a conversation with you just about work with somebody who's on your level or someone who's maybe a little bit below you. The professional therapy sort of tag is very interesting, because now I'm realizing I have therapy relationships with many people across where I'm at now and where I've been. So I do think that the language sort of doesn't take into account the breadth of the relationships you could have.
It's something that was just mentioned a moment ago in terms of the language and the expectations and the follow through. What was the time you had to give, and not necessarily for Sarah, but for a mentee, a protege, tough love? Because it's not always just roses and sunshine. Sometimes there's tough love. So Marisa, maybe you can start.
Yeah, I mean, I give a lot of tough love. That's just, I think one of the biggest tough love things I've had to give, particularly to women, we work in a male-dominated world, and a lot of times the advice, or people are seeking for advice on, oh, I'm the only person in the room, or I don't know what to do because I'm the only person in the room. I need to see somebody that looks like me and my advice is always a bit tough. It's like, you need to get that out of your mind. Like, you need to be the trailblazer. It doesn't matter if there's no one in the room that looks like you. You belong in that room, and you should be trailblazing and pulling others with you. If we have the attitude of, oh, there's no one else that looks like us, and then we'll never get to where we need to be. And that's a bit of tough love I give a lot. Just, trailblaze, be bold, take risk, right? I think that one I do a lot of the time. I don't know if you guys feel the same way.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, along the same lines, and Claudia's mentioned this too, is like, even when I'm looking at whether it's a career growth opportunity, it's like, if you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing. So when somebody comes and tells me like all the great things that they're good at, I'm like, well, where do you want to grow? Where are you struggling with? And having the opportunity for them to be the trailblazer, because that is where you are feeling uncomfortable, but you're leading change. And that's truly where the magic happens, and you can unlock that potential that you never really knew you had. And so if you're only just constantly looking at the things that you're doing well and not necessarily pushing yourself out there and networking, then you're going to be stagnant. And I think that women sometimes get comfortable. and we have to push them out of their comfort zone.
So be bold, be a trailblazer, get comfortable being uncomfortable. It's a great, great piece of advice. Speaking of a trailblazer, we've got a question in our third row here, please.
So I think from the perspective of a mentee, just for a second, I think there's tons of folks we look around the industry and we say, wow, I really admire this person. So my question to you is there a certain amount of, or what type of etiquette might you, suggest that someone has upon reaching out and wanting to build that relationship?
I'd like to start. I'd like to take that one. Is there an etiquette, is that right? Is there an etiquette that you expect of your, either your mentor or your protege?
Well, I have different mentors, and I do kind of read kind of their style, and I do kind of present myself of this is what I'm looking to grow into. So really having an agenda of where are you seeking your growth, and then as well as communicating with them. And sometimes I even set up the same agenda that was a little bit easier with Liz of this is what's going on in my personal side, this is what's going on career side, and this is where I'm seeking that advice. And some mentors are, they're very direct to the point. Others, they're a little bit more conversational. So it's a little bit of reading the room, but still having your objective. And it's up to you to really bring in that agenda. And yes, to your point, if there is an assignment, you have to complete it. Because if not, then the relationship, there's always you're going to be in that plateau of the same conversation. And that's what you don't want.
Yeah, I think intentionality, you said it, is key. And whether it's someone you know that you're asking a particular question of, or maybe someone you don't know. I sometimes get, asked on LinkedIn, like, hey, will you spend 15 minutes on a call? And most of the time I won't, but there are times when the question is so intentional and it's something that touches me or I've followed in my career that I will actually spend the 20-minute conversation because I know that person really thought through it, right? So just be intentional about what it is that you're asking for, and then please, whatever they tell you, follow up and actually do it, right? And let them know later how it helped you, because that's how as mentors, we're fulfilled when we know, okay, my advice actually worked for you. There are times when you give advice and then you never hear from the person again, and it's like, okay, well, I don't know if that investment was worth it or not, because I never heard back,
That's fantastic. And I think that we are about at time right now. I know there's so many great questions from the audience. I'd ask that everyone over lunch, you talk to other people about mentors and what they've given you in your career and how they've helped you out. And also maybe even answer the question of what era would you live in, because that's kind of a fun little thought starter over lunch. With that, I really want to thank all of our panelists. Amazing conversation. I think you're going to get a lot of questions over lunch. And thank you all for your engagement.